Hello everyone, and welcome. Before we start, if you like exploring the hidden stories of history, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now for you. It's always great to connect with you all. Now, get comfortable. What I'm going to share with you might change how you see the drug industry, modern war, and even the idea of addiction itself. Our story begins long before the drug we know today. Before methamphetamine, there was a plant. Not the famous opium poppy, but something older and simpler. The ma-huang plant, or ephedra. This is a tough little shrub that has grown on the windy plains of China and Mongolia for millions of years. It looks ordinary, with thin branches and small leaves. You might walk right by it and not notice. But for more than 5,000 years, healers in ancient China knew its power. They would dry its stems and make a bitter tea. This tea helped people with asthma. It cleared their lungs and gave energy to tired bodies. The reason it worked was a natural compound. People back then didn't know its name. We call it ephedrine. It's a simple molecule, an alkaloid. It wakes up your central nervous system, tightens blood vessels, and opens up airways. It was nature's own energy booster, a gift from a desert plant. For thousands of years, this was its only use. The knowledge stayed, mostly in the East. It was a folk cure passed from one healer to another. Then, in the late 1800s, Eastern traditions met Western science. This meeting would change everything. In 1885, a Japanese chemist named Nagayoshi Nagari was studying in Germany. He learned from a famous scientist named August Wilhelm von Hofmann. Nagari was very interested in the old medicines from his home country. He believed Western chemistry could explain how they worked on a molecular level. He went back to Japan with a goal. He wanted to find the active ingredient in ma-huang. He worked carefully in his lab. He extracted, crystallized, and purified. Finally, he held pure ephedrine in his hands. He had given the ancient remedy, but he didn't stop there. Chemists are natural tinkerers. They like to take molecules apart and rebuild them, trying to make something better than nature. In 1893, Nagari made a small change to the ephedrine molecule. He used a process called reduction. With red phosphorus and iodine, he removed an oxygen atom and added a methyl group. The result was a brand new compound, something that never existed in nature. He named it methamphetamine. At the time, it was just a curiosity, a small note in a science journal. Naga wrote about his discovery. He noted this new stuff seemed to be a stronger stimulant than ephedrine. But he had no plan for it as a medicine. He didn't see what he had truly made. It would take another war, another country, and another chemist to unlock the terrible power inside that simple molecule. The next part of our story happens in Germany, after the First World War. The country was poor and humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, but German chemistry and drug miners making skills worse to the best in the world. Companies like Bayer, Merck, and a new firm called TEMML were leaders in creating new drugs. In 1919, another Japanese chemist, Akira Ogata, improved on Nagari's work. He found a better, cheaper way to make methamphetamine. He started with ephedrine and used a method called reductive amination. This made the drug in a crystal form. The recipe was now out there, ready for someone to use. The German company TEMML was that someone. In 1933, they started selling methamphetamine. They called it Pervitin. The timing was perfect, and very dark. Germany was changing fast. Adolf Hitler was now in power. His dream for the Third Reich needed people who were energetic, never tired, and completely loyal to the state. Pervitin seemed like the perfect chemical helper for this new way of life. You could buy Pervitin without a prescription. It came as small white tablets with a TMML logo. The advertising was everywhere and very clever. They said Pervitin cured depression. They said it treated narcolepsy, sleep disorder. They said it helped people lose weight. They said it made students and workers perform better. Ads showed happy housewives cleaning their homes with endless energy. They showed factory workers who never got tired. They showed students studying all night. And it worked. The drug did exactly what it promised. One pill would flood the brain with dopamine. This created feelings of great happiness, confidence, and unlimited stamina. Tiredness went away. Hunger disappeared. Users felt unstoppable, focused, and super alert. It was the factory owner's dream, a pill that could turn a worker into a machine. Within a few years, Pervitin was everywhere in Germany. Millions of tablets were sold every month. It became as common in a German home as aspirin. But the big change, the one that would put methamphetamine in the history books, came when the army noticed it. In 1938, Hitler was getting ready for war. The German military leaders had a problem. They knew modern war would be about speed and endurance. Their blitzkrieg or lightning war plan needed soldiers who could march for days without sleep. It needed tank crews who could drive all night. It needed pilots who could fly mission after mission without collapsing from exhaustion. Pervitin was the answer. The German military, the Wehrmacht, started giving methamphetamine pills to its soldiers. The pills were a part of their standard field rations. They came in little tins with chocolate and cigarettes. The soldiers called them Panzerschokolade, tank chocolate, a Stücke ablatant named after the dive bombers. Officially, they were just a performance-enhancing stimulant. The effect on the battlefield was instant and frightening. When Germany invaded Poland, in 1939 and then, France in 1940, their soldiers moved with a speed and fierceness that shocked the world. They didn't stop. Whole divisions marched for 36, 48, even 72 hours straight. Tank commanders pushed forward day and night, covering distances people thought were impossible. The French and British armies, who needed normal rest, were completely overrun. They couldn't understand how the Germans moved so fast. The secret was chemical. The Wehrmacht used methamphetamine on a huge scale. Between April and July 1940, during the invasion of France into neighboring countries, the military gave out over 35 million Pervitin tablets. That's enough for every soldier to take multiple pills every day for months. It was the first army in history running on synthetic stimulant. But the drug had a cost. Even during their victories, the side effects started to show. Soldiers who took Pervitin for a long time began to act strange. They became paranoid, easily angered, and aggressive. Some saw things that weren't their hallucinations. Others had heart problems and couldn't stop shaking. And when the drug wore off, the crash was horrible. Soldiers would fall into a deep, coma-like sleep. Some never woke up. Military doctors started to notice. Reports went back to Berlin. Some units couldn't fight not because of the enemy, but because their own men collapsed from days of drug use. There were stories of soldiers shooting at shadows, officers making crazy decisions, whole groups falling apart from a kind of group psychosis. By 1941, the German army tried to limit Pervitin use. They made rules to give it out only in specific combat situations. But it was too late. The soldiers who had felt the drug's power didn't want to give it up. A black market grew inside the army. Men saved their pills, traded them, and took them in secret. Methamphetamine had created a dependency. The mighty Wehrmacht, the most feared army in the world, was quietly becoming addicted. And they were not alone. As World War I spread across the globe, other countries found the same chemical shortcut. The Allies first thought reports of German energy pills were just propaganda, but they soon saw the real advantage. They began making and giving out their own version. If the Germans had Pervitin, the Allies had benzedrine. This wasn't methamphetamine, but its close relative, amphetamine. The chemical difference is small, just one methyl group. But methamphetamine gets into the brain faster and has a stronger, longer effect. People thought amphetamine was a bit safer and less addictive, but that was mostly wrong. A Romanian chemist, Lazare Leniu, first made amphetamine in 1887, like methamphetamine. Nobody paid much attention for decades. The American company Smith, Klein French started selling it as an the minus counter inhaler for stuffy noses. The benzedrine inhaler was a big hit. It was a small tube with a paper strip soaked in amphetamine. You would break it open, put it near your nose, and breathe in. It cleared your sinuses right away, but it all sent a powerful stimulant straight into your blood. People quickly figured out other uses. Students found that if you opened the inhaler and ate the paper strip or put it in coffee, you could stay awake for days to study. Factory workers used it to get through long, boring shifts. By the late 1930s, athletes, musicians, and anyone wanting an edge were using it. When the United States had World War II in 1941, the military knew about benzedrine. The Army Air Forces especially saw its value. Bomber pilots had to fly for 10, 12, or even 15 hours on missions over Germany. They were in tight, freezing cockpits high in the sky. The stress was huge, and tiredness was a constant danger. Little white pills stamped with a B became standard for air crews. They called them Go pills. The British Royal Air Force started even earlier. During the Battle of Britain in 1940, pilots were outnumbered, flying mission after mission against the German Luftwaffe. Benzedrine helped keep them in the air. It let them fly several times a day, fighting off exhaustion and keeping their reactions sharp. It might have even helped Britain survive during those hard months. The Japanese military also loved methamphetamine. In fact, they might have been the most eager users of all. Japanese drug companies had been making methamphetamine since the 1930s. They sold it under names like Philopon and Say-Dormen. Civilians could buy it easily. Ads said it treated everything from asthma to low energy. When Japan went to war, the army took huge amounts of the drug. Japanese soldiers, sailors, and pilots got methamphetamine pills as a normal part of their supplies. The drug was seen as key to keeping up their fighting spirit, that fanatical loyalty and suicidal bravery. Kamikaze pilots, young men about to crash their planes into enemy ships, were reportedly given large doses before their final flights. The drug dulled their fear, sharpened their focus, and made the unthinkable seem not just possible, but honorable. The amount made was unbelievable. By the war's end, Japanese companies had produced billions of methamphetamine pills. The drug was so common, families sent it to soldiers at the front in care packages, right next to rice cakes and letters. It was part of the culture, woven into the war effort itself. But perhaps the most disturbing use was at the very top of Nazi Germany. Adolf Hitler himself, by the mid-1940s, was almost certainly addicted to methamphetamine. His personal doctor, Dr. Theodor Morell, kept notes on the shots he gave the Führer. Starting in 1942, Morell gave Hitler daily injections of something he called vitamins. It was actually a mix of vitamins, hormones, and methamphetamine. This had a deep effect on Hitler's health and decisions. People close to him said he became more unpredictable, paranoid, and out of touch with reality. He would go days without sleep, pacing in his bunker, giving orders that didn't make sense, and raging about enemies everywhere. The famous shaking you see in videos of him from late in the war might have been from long-term methamphetamine use. The drug that once powered his army to victory was now poisoning the mind of its leader. When World War II ended in 1945, methamphetamine had been used by soldiers and civilians on all sides. Hundreds of millions of doses had been made and handed out. A whole generation had been introduced to powerful synthetic stimulants. Many would carry that knowledge and that need into the peace that followed. When the war ended in August 1945, Japan lay in ruins. Tokyo had been firebombed. The cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were gone, destroyed by atomic bombs. The country's industry was shattered. The economy had collapsed. Millions of soldiers came home to a place they barely recognized. They felt defeated, shamed, and deeply hurt, and they were about to face a problem that would shape their nation for the next 20 years. The Japanese military had stored huge amounts of methamphetamine. They saved it for a final, desperate fight to protect their home islands, a fight that never happened. When peace came, these stockpiles were left alone. Tons and tons of pure, pharmaceutical grade methamphetamines sat in warehouses and military bases across Japan. The Allied forces now occupying Japan were focused on bigger problems: disarmament and rebuilding. They did not pay much attention to these chemical stockpiles. After all, they were just pills, but the black market moved fast. Former soldiers, many already hooked on the stimulants from the war, broke into the warehouses. They stole the supplies. Japanese organized crime gangs, the Yakuza, saw a golden chance. They took control of the drugs distribution. Suddenly, methamphetamine flooded the streets of Tokyo, Osaka, and every other city and town. It was sold openly. The police were too few and too overwhelmed to stop it. The drug was cheap, easy to find, and powerfully effective at numbing the pain of a broken nation. People took it to work longer hours rebuilding their country. Students took it to cope with the crushing stress of survival, a life with little food, no fuel, and fading hope. By 1948, experts guessed that nearly 5% of all Japanese people were using methamphetamine regularly. That's about 2 million people. The social damage was terrible. Crime rates shot up. Addicts, filled with drug induced paranoia and anger, committed violent acts. Families fell apart. Mental hospitals filled with patients suffering from stimulant psychosis. These people had hallucinations, strange beliefs, and acted violently, much like people with schizophrenia. Japanese society itself seemed to be coming undone. Finally, the government understood the scale of the disaster. They reacted with very harsh rules. In 1951, they passed the Stimulant Control Law. This made producing, selling, or having methamphetamine a crime. Punishments were severe. The police launched a massive crackdown, arresting tens of thousands of users and dealers. The Yakuza, tough and adaptable, simply went underground. They moved their business out of sight and started other criminal activities. It took almost 10 years, but by the late 1950s, Japan had mostly brought its methamphetamine crisis under control. The drug never completely disappeared. It stayed in the criminal underworld, but it was no longer a national emergency. Japan's painful experience was a dark preview for the rest of the world. The drug created in a lab, turned into a weapon for war, and used to control people, was now loose. It had its own life and momentum. While Japan fought its meth crisis, the United States had its own quiet but important story with amphetamines. The war introduced millions of American soldiers to benzedrine. Many came home liking its effects, but the real explosion in amphetamine use in America didn't come from veterans. It came from doctors and drug companies. In the 1950s, amphetamines were still seen as wonder drugs. Doctors prescribed them freely for a shocking list of problems. Were you tired? Your doctor gave you amphetamines. Were you sad? Amphetamines. Were you overweight? Amphetamines. Cold and concentrate. Amphetamines. Children diagnosed with hyperactivity, what we now call ADHD, were given amphetamines to calm them down, a strange effect that was not well understood at the time. The drug was sold under many brand names: Excedrin, Adderall, bifetamine, and desexin. Yes, desexin is pure, legal, pharmaceutical methamphetamine. It was and still is FDA- approved for severe ADHD and obesity, though it is rarely prescribed today. Drug companies, seeing huge profits, advertised hard to doctors. Medical journals had glossy ads showing happy, energetic patients whose lives were changed by a simple pill. The impact on culture was deep. Amphetamines became part of the American way of life. Truck drivers hauling goods across the huge interstate highways took them to stay awake for marathon drives. They called them white crosses or bennies. They were as common in a truck's cab as a coffee thermos. Students, especially at top universities, used them to cram for exams, pulling all-nighters powered by Excedrin. Housewives, trapped in the boring routine of suburban life, took them to lose weight and find the energy to keep a perfect home and family. Most doctors saw no danger. Amphetamines were viewed as safe, non-addictive if used correctly, and very helpful. But under this respectable surface, a darker pattern was forming. People who took amphetamines for a long time started needing more and more to get the same effect. They built up a tolerance. When they tried to stop, they faced crushing fatigue, deep depression, and an unbearable craving for the drug. They were addicted, even if no one wanted to admit it. By the early 1960s, the United States used more amphetamines per person than any other country. Drug companies made billions of pills every year, far more than could possibly be needed for real medical use. The extra pills were diverted. They went into the black market, into the hands of teenagers, into the blood of a generation. Then came the counterculture. The 1960s was a time of rebellion, experimentation, and trying new chemicals. Young people rejecting their parents' values turned to drugs for freedom. Marijuana, LSD, and mescaline became symbols of a new way of thinking. But amphetamines found a place in this movement too. Speed became the street name, referring to the drug's fast and intense rush. It was popular in growing hippie communities, like San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury. Artists, musicians, and poets used it for long, creative sessions. But speed had a darker side than other drugs of the time. It didn't expand your mind, it narrowed it. It made users focused, obsessive, and paranoid. It fueled mania, not enlightenment. The Hells Angels, the infamous motorcycle gang linked to the violent side of the 1960s counterculture, were deep in the amphetamine in crude labs using recipes from the war days. This was pure pharmaceutical desexin. This was bathtub meth, cooked in dirty kitchens and garages, mixed with toxic fillers and sold in small bags to anyone with cash. The phrase "speed kills" appeared in the late 1960s. Anti-drug activists created it to show the destruction the drug caused. It was on posters and in public service announcements. But for many users, the warning came too late. Methamphetamine addiction was its own special hell. The high was strong but short. The crash that followed was devastating. The only way to avoid the crash was to take more. Long-term users, called speed freaks, would stay awake for days or even weeks. They would twitch, pick at their skin convinced bugs were crawling under it, and lose a lot of weight. Their teeth would rot and fall out, a condition later. Teeth review became unpredictable and violent. Methamphetamine psychosis was common. Users lost touch with reality, suffering from paranoid delusions and hallucinations. The U.S. government, worried by rising drug abuse, began to crack down. The Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act of 1970 classified amphetamine as Schedule I drops. This meant they had a high abuse potential but some medical use. Prescriptions became harder to get. Drug companies, under pressure, made fewer pills. By the late 1970s, the days of easily getting amphetamines were over. But this crackdown had an unexpected result. It did not kill the demand. It just moved the production. With pharmaceutical meth harder to find, the black market grew to fill the gap. And the people making it were not chemists in clean labs. They were criminals in makeshift kitchens. The meth they made was dirtier, more dangerous, and more addictive than ever before. The age of super-labs in Mexican drug cartels was about to begin. By the 1980s, methamphetamine in America had changed completely. It was no longer the white crosses from a doctor or the Desexin from a pharmacy. It was an outlaw drug made in secret labs, moved by criminal gangs, and used by an increasingly desperate group of people. The first wave of illegal meth production in the U.S. was small and scattered. Biker gangs, especially the Hells Angels, ran crude labs in rural areas. They used a method called the P2P, or phenyl to propan 1 method. It needed precursor chemicals that were fairly easy to get into simple but dangerous cooking process. The final product was often weak and contaminated, but it was cheap and available. Then, in the 1980s, two big changes happened. A new recipe people found a better way to make meth called the ephedrine reduction method, or the Nazi method, because it was based on a World War II German process. This method used ephedrine, or pseudoephedrine in the active ingredient. It was easier, faster, and made a purer product. Most importantly, the ingredients were legal and easy to buy. The cartels arrived. Mexican drug cartels rose to power. These groups had grown rich and strong from selling marijuana and cocaine. They saw methamphetamine as a profitable new product. They had the organization, the distribution networks, and the chemical knowledge to make the drug on an industrial scale. They also had something the American biker gangs did not: access to massive amounts of precursor chemicals. The cartels built super labs. These were hidden facilities in Mexico, often in remote warehouses or rural properties, that could make hundreds of pounds of meth per batch. These were not dirty garages. They were advanced operations with professional lab equipment, ventilation systems, and trained chemists. The meth they made was incredibly pure, often over 90% pure. Getting the drugs across the border was equally impressive. Cartels smuggled the finished product in cars with hidden compartments, in trucks carrying normal goods, and even through tunnels dug under the border fence. Once in the U.S., it was sold through a huge network of dealers. It reached cities and towns everywhere. The price was low, the purity was high, and it was easier to get than ever before. By the 1990s, meth use was exploding, especially in rural America and small towns. These were places mostly untouched by the crack cocaine epidemic of the 1980s, which hit big cities hard. Methamphetamine, however, thrived in the heartland. It was popular with white working-class people, construction workers, farmers, factory workers. They often used it not to get high, but to work longer hours at tough, low-paying jobs. But the drug had another appeal. It was a social drug, a party drug. Unlike heroin, which makes users sleepy and alone, methamphetamine gives energy and makes people want to talk and connect. People used it at all-night raves, in bars, and in living rooms with friends. They would talk non-stop, take apart electronics, or have marathon sex sessions. It created a false feeling of closeness and friendship. It created a false feeling of a chemical bond that felt real in the moment, but vanished when the drug wore off. The human cost of this epidemic was immense. Methamphetamine destroyed families. Parents lost an addiction would neglect or abuse their children. Child welfare systems in states like Iowa, Oklahoma, and Oregon were flooded with cases. Children were found living in filthy, dangerous homes. Whole communities became unstable. Crime rates jumped. Domestic violence, theft, and assault all increased sharply in areas with high meth use. Then there was the environmental damage. Making meth is a dirty, toxic process. For every pound of meth made, 5 to 6 pounds of hazardous waste are created: solvents, acids, heavy metals, and other poisons. Cooks would dump this waste down drains, bury it in backyards, or leave it in fields. Houses where meth was made became toxic waste sites, unsafe to live in. The government responded by trying to cut off the supply of ingredients. In the 1990s and early 2000s, laws were passed to control the sale of medicines containing ephedrine and pseudoephedrine. The Combat Methamphetamine Epidemic Act of 2005 was a key law. It required these medicines to be kept behind the pharmacy counter. It limited how much one person could buy and made buyers show ID and sign a logbook. The impact was immediate and dramatic. Small, homemade meth labs in the U.S., the shake and bake operations in kitchens and motel rooms were wiped out. Without easy access to cold medicine, they can't cook. The number of meth lab busts in America fell sharply. For a moment, it looked like the problem was solved. But the cartels, as always, adapted. They simply moved all their production to Mexico, where they could still get the precursor chemicals in bulk from countries like China and India. The super labs south of the border increased their output to unbelievable levels. The meth that flooded back into the United States was cheaper, purer, and more plentiful than ever. The problem of domestic production was gone, but the problem of people using meth was worse than ever. Today we are living through the worst methamphetamine crisis in history. The numbers are shocking and clear. In 2020, nearly 2.5 million Americans said they had used meth in the past year. Deaths from meth overdoses have increased more than 5 times since 2012. In 2021, over 32,000 Americans died from overdoses involving stimulants like meth. That is more than one person dying every 15 minutes. But this crisis is not just in the United States. Methamphetamine is now a worldwide epidemic. In Southeast Asia Island, the Philippines, Myanmar, the drug is called Yoba crazy medicine. It is made in huge amounts in the lawless Golden Triangle region. The labs there are massive, producing millions of pills every month. In Australia, meth called ice is the country's worst drug problem. Australians use more of it per person than almost anyone else. Gangs smuggle it in by ship, plane, and even in liquid hidden in bottles. In the Czech Republic and Eastern Europe, a homemade form called pervit in the same name as the Nazi drug is made in small labs and widely used. In South Africa, a smokable form called TIK has destroyed communities. The drug is now in every corner of the world. It adapts to local cultures and economies. Today's meth is different from the past in one key way: purity. The cartels have perfected their recipes. The average purity of meth seized at the U.S. border is now over 95%. This is pharmaceutical-grade product made by skilled chemists. The days of weak, dirty biker meth are long gone. This super-pure meth has terrible results. Users used to weaker drugs can easily overdose when they try this new version. A meth overdose does not look like a heroin overdose where breathing slows and stops. A meth overdose pushes the body too far. It can cause the body to fall. Strokes, heart attacks, dangerous seizures, extreme overheating, hypothermia. The user's heart races until it fails. Their brain overheats until it is damaged forever. There is also the problem of polygrade use. More and more, people use meth together with opioids like fentanyl. This mix is called a speedball. It is especially deadly. The methastimulant hides the slowing, sedating effect of the fentanyl, a depressant. So users take more fentanyl than their body can handle, leading to overdose. Or when the meth wears off, the full force of the fentanyl hits at once and stops their breathing. This combination is creating a new, more lethal wave of the overdose crisis. Meth also causes unique long-term health problems. Meth mouth severe teeth decay and loss from dry mouth, poor hygiene, and the drug's corrosive chemicals. Skin sores, users pick at their skin, convinced bugs are crawling under it. This causes open, infected wounds. Brain damage. The drug is neurotoxic. It kills brain cells, especially in areas for memory, decision-making, and emotion. Long-term users often have lasting thinking problems. Mental illness. Meth can trigger psychosis that looks exactly like paranoid schizophrenia. Users hear voices, see things, and believe people are plotting against them. This psychosis can last for months after quitting and sometimes never fully goes away. Perhaps worst of all, meth changes the brain's reward system forever. It floods the brain with dopamine, the feel-good chemical, at levels hundreds of times higher than normal pleasure like eating or love. To cope, the brain does two things. It makes less of its own natural dopamine. It removes some dopamine receptors, the parts of brain cells that feel the pleasure. This leaves the user in a state called anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure from anything. Food tastes like nothing. Music brings no joy. Love feels empty. The only thing that can break through this numbness is more meth. It is a neurological prison built by the brain itself. The story of meth is told with statistics, but behind every number is a person, and around every user is a circle of other victims. Think of the children. Thousands have been taken from homes where meth was used or made. These children see horrible things: violence, neglect, abuse. They breathe toxic fumes from labs, which can poison or burn them. They go their parents unconscious. They go days without food. They learn to be silent and invisible. Foster care systems in hard-hit states are broken. There are not enough foster homes. Children sleep in social workers' offices or hotels. Many never recover from this trauma. Think of the first responders: police, firefighters, paramedics. They are the first on the scene. They walk into toxic meth houses, avoiding booby traps and violent users. They find the bodies. They find the bodies. They find the bodies. They see things no one should see. Many get PTSD, depression, or turn to alcohol to cope. Meth lab busts are especially dangerous. The chemicals can explode, and the fumes cause long-term health problems. Think of the communities. Small towns across America have been hollowed out. Main streets have boarded suck shops. Neighborhoods are poisoned and empty. Crime soars. Trust disappears. In some counties, over 5% of adults are addicted. Local governments have no money to fix it. Jails are full. Hospitals are overwhelmed. The true cost is beyond measure. To understand why meth is so addictive, we must understand the brain. Our brain uses chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. Dopamine is one of the most important. It is the reward chemical. It is released when we do something good for survival, like eating or achieving a goal. It makes us feel pleasure and teaches us to repeat that behavior. Methamphetamine hijacks this system with brutal efficiency. A normal pleasure might raise dopamine levels by 5,100%. Meth can raise them by 1,200% or more. It doesn't just tickle the reward system, it blows it up. The rush is so powerful that the brain instantly decides this is the most important experience possible. But meth does more. It forces neurons to release huge amounts of dopamine. It blocks dopamine from being reabsorbed, so it stays in the brain longer. It stops the enzyme that normally breaks dopamine down. The result? A prolonged, artificial flood of pleasure signals. The high can last 8 to 12 hours, much longer than cocaine. The brain is not built for this. It fights back to protect itself. It reduces the number of dopamine receptors during Juliet. It produces less of its own natural dopamine. This is the brain trying to find balance. But it has a catastrophic side effect. When the drug wears off, the user is left with fewer receptors and less natural dopamine than before. Nothing feels good. Nothing brings pleasure. They feel depressed, empty, and dead inside. Their brain, now rewired, knows only one solution: more meth. This is the chemical basis of addiction. The brain has been changed to need the drug. Recovery is possible, but it is slow and hard. The brain can heal, but it can take a year or more for dopamine systems to recover. During that time, the world feels flat and grey. The craving is immense. The relapse rate is high. The modern meth crisis is fueled by powerful criminal organizations. Mexican cartels are not street gangs. They are sophisticated, international businesses worth billions. Meth is one of their best products. The two main cartels in the meth trade are the Sinaloa cartel, once led by El Chapo Guzman. They built an empire on cocaine and marijuana and were early leaders in producing meth. The Jalisco New Generation cartel, CJNGI, newer, more violent group. They are known for brutality but also for business skill. They make meth cheap and pure. The scale is hard to grasp. A single super lab can make hundreds of kilograms of meth per week. The cartels run dozens, maybe hundreds, of these labs in Mexico and Central America. The chemicals ephedrine, pseudoephedrine come by the ton from chemical companies in China and India. These companies often operate in a legal gray area, knowing where their products end up. The smuggling is highly organized. Meth crosses the border in hidden car compartments, in trucks with legal cargo, and through sophisticated underground tunnels with lights and rails. The violence is staggering. In Mexico, cartel wars have killed hundreds of thousands. They murdered journalists, police, and politicians. In some areas, cartels are the real government. Corruption is everywhere. Cartel money has bribed law enforcement and officials in many countries. For over 50 years, the main approach to drugs like meth has been prohibition and punishment. The idea is that drug use is a moral failure by bad people, and the solution is to arrest users, jail dealers, and cut off the supply. It has not worked. By any measure, the war on drugs is a catastrophic failure. We have spent over $1 trillion. We have incarcerated millions of people. Drugs are cheaper, purer, and easier to get than ever before. Punishment has made things worse. It ruins lives. A drug conviction makes it hard to get a job, housing, or an education. It creates a permanent underclass. It ignores treatment. Prisons are full of people with addiction, but they get little to no help. When released, they often use again. It fuels crime. Prohibition makes drugs extremely profitable for violent cartels. It wastes resources. Money spent on jails could fund treatment, healthcare, and prevention. While we focus on punishment, the healthcare system lacks resources. Treatment centers are rare, especially in rural areas. Wait lists are long. Many people cannot afford help. Stigma also keeps people from seeking help. They are called junkies and addicts, seen as moral failures, not people with a health condition. Some places are trying a different way. Portugal decriminalized all drugs in 2001. If you are caught with drugs, you are not arrested. You meet with the Discretion Commission of Health and Social Workers. They assess your situation and offer help. The results: drug use did not go up. Overdose deaths fell dramatically. HIV infections among drug users dropped by over 90%. Crime decreased. treating methamphetamine addiction is one of the biggest challenges in medicine today. Unlike opioid addiction, where medicines like methadone can help, there is no easy pill to cure meth addiction. There is no medication to quickly stop the cravings or fix the brain's chemistry. Getting better from meth mainly depends on hard work, therapy, and strong support. The most common treatment is talk therapy, especially cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT). This helps users understand their own thoughts and actions. They learn to spot the situations, people, or feelings that make them want to use the drug. Then, they learn new skills to deal with those triggers without turning to meth. This takes time, a good therapist, and real effort from the patient. It works best when combined with other help, like a safe place to live, a steady job, and friends or family who support recovery. Another method that shows good results is called contingency management. It uses simple rewards to encourage staying drug-free. Patients give urine samples regularly. If the sample is clean, they get a reward like a voucher, a small cash bonus or a privilege. It sounds simple, but it works. For a brain damaged by meth that can't feel normal pleasure, these small, immediate rewards can help strain it. Over time, joy in it. As healing happens, patients start to find joy in everyday life again. Residential treatment programs can also be effective. These are live-in centers where people stay for weeks or months. They offer a break from the environment where they use drugs. They provide intense therapy, group support, and structure. However, these programs are expensive, have long waiting lists, and are not covered by many insurance plans. The sad truth is that most people with meth addiction never get proper treatment. They get caught in a terrible cycle: addiction, crime, arrest, jail, release, and then back to addiction. They overdose, they die. Even for those who do find help, the road back is very tough. Relapse is common, especially in the first year. The brain changes are so deep, and the pull of the drug is so strong that recovery is a lifelong fight. There is hope in new research. Scientists are testing medicines that could help balance the brain's dopamine system without causing a high. Others are working on a methamphetamine vaccine. This vaccine would teach the body's immune system to attack meth molecules, stopping them from reaching the brain. These are still in early testing, but they could one day change how we fight this addiction. More and more, experts understand that to treat addiction, you must also treat its root causes. Why do people start? Often, it's to escape pain. Many users have deep trauma, mental illness like depression or anxiety, crushing poverty, or feel completely alone. Meth makes them feel powerful and happy for a short time. Effective treatment must end drug use, but also the broken life and hurting mind that led to it. Behind all the numbers and policies are real people, with faces, names, and families. To understand this epidemic, we must listen to their stories. Sarah's story: she was a high school teacher in Oregon. In the 1990s, her doctor prescribed meth as Desix for weight loss. When the prescription ended, her need for the drug did not. She bought it on the street. Within a year, she lost her job, her home, and custody of her two children. She lived in her car, then in homeless camps. She overdosed multiple times and went to prison 3 times. It took her 15 years to find recovery. Today she works at a treatment center, helping others walk the same hard path she did. Miguel's story: he was a brilliant chemist in Mexico City. He couldn't find a legal job. A drug girl offered him a salary 10 times higher to cook meth in a super lab. For 5 years, he made hundreds of kilos of the drug. He lived well, but in constant fear. He saw co-workers killed for making mistakes. He finally fled, turned himself in, and now lives in witness protection. He is haunted by the suffering his skills helped create. David's story: he grew up in a small Midwest town. His parents used meth. By 16, he was using too to escape the chaos at home. He became a tweaker, staying up for days, paranoid, picking at his skin. He stole from his family to buy drugs. At 22, he was arrested during a meth lab explosion that burned his arms. In jail, he finally got into a treatment program. It was the first time someone told him his addiction was a sickness, not a moral failure. Works construction, and is rebuilding a relationship with his younger sister. The paramedic story: Emily works in rural Indiana. She has seen the worst of the crisis. She has revived people from meth overdoses. She has entered toxic, booby miner-strapped homes to save children. She has held the hand of a dying teenager. The stress has given her nightmares and anxiety. She copes as best she can, but she keeps showing up for work because, as she says, if we don't help them, who will? These stories, and millions like them, are the real picture of the meth epidemic. They are stories of broken systems, deep pain, and also of incredible strength and slow, painful healing. What have we learned from the long, dark history of methamphetamine? One thing is clear: there are no easy answers. You cannot arrest your way out of this problem. A single law or police crackdown will not fix it. This is a complex crisis that needs a full, smart, and compassionate response. Here is what a better approach might look like. First, shift from punishment to public health. We must stop treating addiction as a crime. It is a chronic health condition, a brain disorder. This means invest heavily in treatment, build more clinics, train more counselors, make help easy to find and affordable. Meet people where they are, support harm reduction like needle exchanges and overdose minus reversal kits, naloxone. These save lives and can be the first step to recovery. Second, attack the root causes. Addiction grows in the soil of despair. We must fight poverty and create good jobs. Provide safe, affordable housing. Make treatment for mental illness easy to get. Support strong communities and families. Third, have smarter law enforcement. Instead of jailing low-level users, focus resources on disrupting the big cartels and international chemical networks, working with other countries to stop the flow of precursor chemicals, fighting the corruption that lets cartels operate. Fourth, be honest and educate. We need honest talk about drugs. Scare tactics don't work. Young people need real facts about meth's dangers, the brain damage, the psychosis, the loss of everything they love. They also need to learn healthy ways to cope with stress and pain. Fifth, destroy the stigma. This may be the hardest part. We must change how we see people with addiction. They are not junkies. They are someone's child, parent, or friend. They are sick and need help, not shame. Compassion is a more powerful tool than punishment. The story of methamphetamine is, in the end, a story about us. It is about human curiosity and its unintended consequences. A chemist in a lab long ago wanted to understand the plant. He created a molecule that would change history. It powered armies, shattered nations, created vast criminal empires, and caused waves of human suffering. It was a tool meant to improve life that instead destroyed countless lives. We underestimated its power. We failed to see that a chemical that could keep a soldier awake could also break his mind. We failed to see that banning it would not make it disappear, but would hand its control to murderous cartels. The shadow of this drug is long, and we are still in it. But there is light too. There are people in recovery, living proof that healing is possible. There are doctors, researchers, and counselors working every day for solutions. There are parents, activists, and former users fighting for change. The molecule cannot be made. It exists. The question now is not how to wish it away, but how we choose to live with it. How do we reduce the harm? How do we help our neighbors, our family members, ourselves? The secret war drug that became a global epidemic is still here, but our story is not over. It is written by every person who chooses recovery, by every policy that chooses care over cages, by every act of kindness shown to someone in their darkest moment. The journey out of the shadow is long and hard, but we can walk toward the light together. Thank you for listening to this story. If this has given you a new understanding, please share it. Let's demand smarter, kinder solutions. Let's remember the human beings behind the headlines. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. The story of methamphetamine is not just a list of facts. It is a web of human choices, scientific accidents, and moments where history took a dark turn. To truly grasp its impact, we need to look closer at those moments, to see the faces in the crowd. Let's go back to the beginning, to the humble ephedrine plant. Imagine a traditional healer in ancient China, picking the dry, scraggly stems. He brews a bitter tea for a farmer struggling to breathe. The farmer drinks it, and soon his chest loosens, his energy returns. The simple act of healing, repeated for millennia, is where our story starts. It was medicine pure and simple. No one could have foreseen the monster that would grow from this root. The leap from healing tea to chemical warfare happened in a laboratory. Think of Noga Yoshinogiri, the Japanese chemist, bent over his equipment in the 1890s. He was a man of two worlds, steeped in the herbal traditions of the East, yet trained in the cutting-edge ephedrine. He was a triumph of science. But his curiosity didn't stop there. The act of tinkering, changing one molecule, was standard practice. He was not a villain, he was a scientist exploring. His creation, methamphetamine, sat quietly in a journal for decades. It was a solution without a problem, a key waiting for a lock. The lock was found in the desperate heart of pre-war Germany. Picture a Berlin pharmacy in 1937. A woman walks in, feeling tired and overwhelmed by the demands of the new Nazi society. The pharmacist recommends Pervitin. It will give you energy for the fatherland, he might say. She buys the small tin, taking the pills home. She becomes one of millions, a housewife, a student, a clerk, and knowingly driving a drug that would soon fuel an army. Methamphetamine was not a street drug, it was a patriotic product. Now, picture the battlefield of France, 1940th. A young German tank driver, his eyes widened unblinking after 48 hours of continuous advance. He has taken his Panzer showload. Fatigue is gone. He feels invincible. He feels invincible. A part of a relentless machine. His unit moves at a pace that defies logic, encircling confused Allied forces. The Blitzkrieg was not just a tactic, it was a pharmacological phenomenon. On the other side of the world, in a Japanese fighter plane over the Pacific, a pilot prepares for a kamikaze mission. His hands are steady, his mind eerily calm after being given a potent dose of methamphetamine. The drug has transformed his terror into fatalistic focus. It has turned a human being into a guided missile. This was perhaps the most tragic use of the drug, exploiting a young man's loyalty and using chemistry to make him embrace his own destruction. The post-war period in Japan is a haunting lesson in unintended consequences. Imagine a warehouse in Tokyo in 1946. The door is pried open by a former soldier, shivering not from cold, but from craving. He sees boxes stacked to the ceiling, full of the very pills that kept him going in the jungle. He stuffs his pockets. This scene, repeated across the nation, flooded a shattered society with a dangerous comfort. The drug meant to help Japan win the war now ensured its social collapse. The epidemic that followed was the world's first glimpse of a meth crisis, a preview of the devastation to come. Shift to America in the sunny, prosperous 1950s. The advertisements told a story of effortless perfection. A magazine ad shows a smiling woman in an immaculate kitchen. The caption reads, "Feeling tired? Lose weight and regain your youthful energy." The promise was not of a high, but of a better, more successful version of the American dream. In doctors' offices across the country, prescriptions were written casually. Amphetamines were the secret weapon of the busy executive, the dieting housewife, the overworked student. The dependency built quietly, masked by respectability and social approval. The 1960s counterculture exposed the dark side of this wonder drug. In a San Francisco apartment, filled with the smell of incense and the sound of psychedelic rock, the different scene unfolds. A speed freak, awake for his fifth day, is meticulously taking apart a radio, convinced he can hear secret messages. The drug that promised enlightenment now delivers paranoia and mania. The speed kills posters on the street corners were not just warnings. They were descriptions of a reality playing out in crash pads and communes. The Hells Angels, with their crude labs, turned meth from a prescription into a rebel's tool, linking it to a new kind of outlaw culture. The rise of the Mexican cartels in the 1980s industrialized the outlaw. Forget the lone biker cooking in a trailer. Now, imagine a super lab hidden in a remote corner of Sinaloa. It looks like a small, clean factory. Men in protective gear, not masks to hide identity, but respirators to protect from fumes, manage large chemical vats. This is not a chaotic operation. It is a business with quality control, supply chains, and profit margin. The cartels didn't just sell drugs. They perfected a product and an incredibly efficient, ruthless delivery system. This efficiency brought the crisis home to rural America, doctored down the main street of a small town in the Midwest today. You might see a once vibrant downtown now with empty storefronts. Talk to the local sheriff, and he'll tell you most of his calls are now meth-related domestic disputes, thefts, bizarre and violent behavior. Visit the county hospital's emergency room. The doctor will describe patients brought in with sky-high body temperatures, hearts racing out of control, minds lost in terrifying hallucinations. This is not an urban problem, it's a heartland epidemic. The drug has seeped into the foundations of communities, damaging the social fabric in ways that will take generations to repair. The human faces of this epidemic are everywhere, yet often invisible. They are the children in foster care, moved from home to home, carrying trauma in their small backpacks. They are the grandparents in their 70s, suddenly raising their grandchildren because their own children are lost to addiction. They are the factory workers who started using to keep up with double shifts and now can't function without it. The environmental damage is a silent crisis. A house where meth was cooked is not just a crime scene, it is a toxic waste site. The chemicals seep into the walls, the carpets, the very soil. Cleanup costs tens of thousands of dollars, money that many communities don't have. These meth houses stand as poisoned monuments, dragging down neighborhood property values and posing long-term health risks. Understanding the grip of meth requires a journey into the brain. Think of your brain's reward system as a lush, beautiful garden. Dopamine is the water that makes the flowers bloom when you do something good. Methamphetamine doesn't just water the garden, it opens a firehouse. It drowns the flowers and washes away the soil. In response, the brain, to survive, turns off the water supply and removes the flower beds. The garden becomes a desert. Nothing grows. The only way to feel anything again is with another blast from the firehouse. This is why willpower alone fails. The landscape of the brain itself has been scorched. Confronting this reality means asking hard questions about our policies. The war on drugs has been like trying to stop a flood by arresting individual drops of water. We have filled prisons, spent billions, and created a cycle of crime and punishment that feeds the very problem it tries to solve. The story of meth proves that you cannot punish a disease into submission. But other stories offer a different path. In Portugal, the shift from handcuffs to help has saved lives and restored dignity. It recognizes that a person using drugs is a person in need of care, not a criminal to be locked away. This approach requires courage and a fundamental change in thinking, but the evidence is clear it works. The road forward is difficult, but it is marked by signs of hope. Recovery, though hard, is real. Every day, people walk out of the shadow of addiction. Scientists are searching for new tools, medicines, vaccines, better therapies. Communities are starting to focus on prevention, building resilience in young people, offering support before addiction takes hold. The molecule that began in an ancient plant and was transformed in a chemist's flask has traveled a long, dark road through history. Its story is a cautionary tale about human ingenuity without wisdom, about shortcuts that become dead ends. But the final chapter isn't written yet. It is being written in treatment centers, in research labs, in policy debates, and in the quiet courage of individuals choosing a different path. The light exists. It is found in compassion, in science, in community, and I.